14 police dogs surrounded a small girl at Riverside International Airport. Captain Blackwood laughed when her mother said, "She can help." What happened next changed airport security forever. The fluorescent lights of Riverside International Airport buzzed overhead as thousands of travelers rushed through the main terminal, dragging suitcases and checking flight information on enormous screens. It was organized chaos, the kind that happened every single day in one of the busiest airports in the country. But today, something was different. Today, the normal rhythm of departures and arrivals was about to be shattered by an event that would make international headlines. Sarah Mitchell gripped her daughter's hand tightly as they made their way through the security checkpoint. Emma, her small daughter, clutched a worn, stuffed animal and looked around with wide, curious eyes at the massive space surrounding them. Sarah's heart was pounding. They were running late for their flight to visit Emma's grandmother, who was sick and living across the country. Every minute counted. "Madam, please place all items in the bins," the security officer said in a monotone voice, gesturing toward the gray plastic containers. Sarah quickly complied, removing her shoes, her laptop, and helping Emma do the same. The little girl giggled as she took off her sneakers, revealing mismatched socks that made Sarah smile despite her stress. They'd left the house in such a hurry that morning. But as they walked through the metal detector, an alarm suddenly pierced the air. Red lights flashed. Security officers immediately converged on their position. "Step aside, please," a stern voice commanded. Sarah's stomach dropped. "There must be a mistake. We don't have anything." "Step aside, madam," the officer repeated, more forcefully this time. Captain Richard Blackwood emerged from the security office, his uniform crisp and his expression displaying the kind of authority that came from years of dealing with potential threats. He was a man who took his job seriously, perhaps too seriously. His reputation for being ruthlessly efficient had made him both respected and feared throughout the airport. "What's the situation?" Blackwood demanded, approaching the checkpoint with long strides. "The child triggered the advanced scanner, sir," Officer Jennifer Hayes reported, checking her tablet. "The system detected something unusual." Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he looked down at Emma, who was now hiding partially behind her mother's leg. "Search the bags. Search everything." Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. "Captain, please. We're going to miss our flight. My mother is very ill. We need to—" "Security protocols don't bend for personal circumstances," Blackwood interrupted coldly. "If there's a threat, we address it. No exceptions." Officers began emptying their bags with systematic efficiency, pulling out clothes, toiletries, Emma's coloring books. Other travelers slowed down to watch, some pulling out phones to record. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with humiliation as her entire life seemed to be displayed for public scrutiny. "Please," Sarah tried again, her voice breaking. "There's nothing dangerous. We're just a mother and daughter trying to visit family." "That's what they all say," Blackwood replied dismissively. He turned to Officer Hayes. "Bring in the K-9 units. All of them." Hayes hesitated. "Sir, all of them? Did I stutter, officer?" Blackwood's voice cut through the terminal like a knife. "This scanner indicated something. I want every trained dog we have on duty here. Now." What happened next created a scene that nobody in the airport would ever forget. Within minutes, 14 German Shepherds arrived with their handlers, forming a massive presence in the security area. These were the airport's elite detection dogs, trained to find explosives, narcotics, and other dangerous materials. They were the best of the best, and having all of them deployed at once for a single traveler was completely unprecedented. The dogs surrounded Emma in a wide circle, their handlers keeping them at attention. The little girl stood frozen in the center, her stuffed animal pressed against her chest. Travelers stopped completely now, forming a crowd behind the security barriers. Phones were everywhere, recording what appeared to be a massive security response to a small child. "This is ridiculous," Sarah said, tears forming in her eyes. "She's just a little girl. Look at her." "Age is irrelevant to threats," Blackwood stated, crossing his arms. "We've seen threats come from unexpected sources. Security cannot be compromised because someone appears innocent." Officer Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Captain, maybe we should—" "Begin the search," Blackwood ordered. The handlers moved forward with their dogs, beginning the systematic process of having each animal check Emma and the scattered belongings. But something strange started happening. Instead of alerting to anything dangerous, The dogs began acting in a way their handlers had rarely seen. One by one, they sat down, but not in the standard alert position. They were simply sitting, watching Emma with what could only be described as calm interest. "What are they doing?" Blackwood demanded. Blackwood. "Why aren't they alerting?" "Sir, they're not detecting anything," one of the handlers said, confusion evident in his voice. "They're just sitting." Emma, who had been terrified moments before, suddenly did something that shocked everyone present. She took a small step forward toward the nearest dog, a large German shepherd named Duke. She extended her tiny hand slowly, carefully, in the universal gesture of offering friendship to an animal. "Don't move!" Blackwood shouted. But Emma either didn't hear him or didn't understand the command. She continued her slow approach, and Duke, to everyone's amazement, leaned his head forward and gently sniffed her hand. Then something even more remarkable happened. His tail began to wag, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. "That's impossible," Duke's handler whispered. "Duke doesn't do that. He's a working dog. He never—" But Duke wasn't alone. One by one, the other 13 dogs began showing similar behavior, tails wagging, bodies relaxing. Some even lay down in what handlers recognized as a posture of complete trust and submission. It was as if Emma possessed some kind of invisible connection with the animals that transcended their training. "What is happening?" Blackwood demanded, his authoritative demeanor cracking for the first time. "These dogs are trained professionals. They don't behave like this." Sarah, watching her daughter interact with the massive dogs surrounding her, felt tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of something else entirely, a mixture of relief and something deeper, something painful that she'd been carrying for a very long time. "Maybe," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the crowd. "You should ask what she can do instead of treating her like a threat." "What she can do?" Blackwood turned to face Sarah, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "What are you talking about?" Emma was now sitting on the floor, surrounded by 14 police dogs, all of whom were behaving completely unlike trained security animals. Some had their heads in her lap. Others were lying down nearby, watching her with what appeared to be adoration. The little girl was giggling, gently petting each one, whispering words that nobody else could hear. The crowd of travelers had grown massive now. Hundreds of people watched the unprecedented scene. Airport employees had stopped working. Even the flight announcements seemed to pause in the background. Everyone's attention was fixed on the small girl surrounded by the elite security dogs of Riverside International Airport. "Your scanners didn't detect a threat," Sarah continued, wiping her tears. "They detected something else. Something your machines don't understand. Something that only the dogs can sense." "That's nonsense," Blackwood snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Security scanners detect materials, substances. They don't detect whatever you're implying." Officer Hayes stepped forward, her tablet in hand. "Sir, I'm looking at the scanner reading again. It's not showing the typical signature we see for threats. It's showing something the system flagged as unusual but couldn't categorize. The software literally has no reference for what it detected." Emma looked up from the dogs and turned her attention to Captain Blackwood for the first time. Her small voice carried across the now quiet terminal. "The doggies are sad." Blackwood blinked. "What?" "The doggies," Emma repeated, stroking the head of a dog named Ranger, who had positioned himself protectively beside her. "They're sad because they work so hard, and nobody tells them they're good. They just want to know they're loved." The handlers exchanged glances. It was true that working dogs lived highly regimented lives, trained to perfection but often treated as equipment rather than the living, feeling beings they were. But how could this child know that? How could she sense what even experienced handlers sometimes forgot? "This is absurd," Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its edge. He looked around at his carefully trained K9 units, all of whom were now completely focused on Emma, their professional demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like joy. "These dogs have work to do. This is a security situation, not a petting zoo." "With respect, sir," Duke's handler spoke up. "I've worked with Duke for 5 years. I've never seen him respond to anyone like this. Not to other handlers, not to trainers, not even to me on most days. Whatever this child has, it's real. The dogs know something we don't." Sarah took a deep breath. It was time to tell them what she'd been hiding, what she'd been protecting Emma from since she was old enough to understand that her gift was something the world might not accept. My daughter has a condition. It's not dangerous. It's not a threat. But it's not something your scanners were designed to detect. What condition? Blackwood demanded, his authority struggling against the evidence of his own eyes, as 14 highly trained police dogs continued to ignore their training in favor of staying near Emma. She has an extremely rare neurological condition, Sarah explained, her voice steady now despite her tears. Her brain processes and produces certain chemical signals differently than other people. Doctors call it canine empathic recognition syndrome. She emits pheromones and neural signals that dogs can detect and respond to. They sense her emotions, her intentions, her kindness. They know, on an instinctive level, that she understands them in a way that humans normally can't. The terminal was completely silent now. Even the background noise of the airport seemed to have faded away. Everyone was listening to Sarah's explanation of something that sounded like science fiction, but was playing out before their eyes. She's not dangerous, Sarah continued. She's the opposite of dangerous. She's the reason why aggressive dogs become calm, why frightened dogs find courage, why working dogs like yours remember what it feels like to be treated as more than just tools. Captain Blackwood stood frozen, his entire worldview cracking. For years he'd operated under the principle that security meant suspicion, that protection meant treating everyone as a potential threat. But now, watching his elite dogs, animals that had been trained at enormous expense and with rigorous protocols, completely abandon their training to comfort and protect a small child, he was confronting something his systems and procedures had never prepared him for. The scanner, Officer Hayes said slowly, reading from her tablet. It detected the unusual neural and chemical activity. The system flagged it because it couldn't categorize it. It wasn't a threat signature, but it wasn't normal either. The computer didn't know what to do with the reading. Emma continued sitting with the dogs, completely at peace, while the adults around her struggled to process what was happening. She looked up at her mother and smiled. "Mommy, can we bring them all home?" Despite everything, the humiliation, the fear, the public exposure, Sarah laughed. It was a sound of pure love and relief. "No, sweetheart, these dogs have important jobs, but I think they're very happy that they met you." Blackwood watched the scene for a long moment. His jaw worked as he processed what had happened, what he had done. He'd deployed 14 highly trained security dogs to investigate a child who turned out to possess a gift that most people would never understand. He'd humiliated a mother and terrified a little girl. And he'd done it all in the name of security, without ever considering that sometimes the things that seem unusual aren't threats at all. They're miracles. "Officer Hayes," Blackwood said finally, his voice quiet, "clear them through security. Arrange for them to make their flight." "Yes, sir," Hayes responded immediately, relief evident in her voice. But as Sarah began gathering their belongings, trying to restore some dignity to the situation, Blackwood found himself unable to simply walk away. Something fundamental had shifted in those few minutes, and he was man enough to recognize it, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. "Mrs. Mitchell," Blackwood called out as Sarah took Emma's hand to lead her away. Sarah turned, expecting perhaps another security protocol or bureaucratic obstacle. But what Blackwood said next surprised everyone within earshot. "I'm sorry. I was wrong." The words hung in the air, simple but profound, coming from a man who rarely admitted error. And in that moment, with 14 police dogs still watching Emma with what could only be described as affection, the foundation was laid for something that would change not just one airport's security procedures, but the entire understanding of how humans and animals could work together for safety and compassion. The story was just beginning. The aftermath of the incident spread through Riverside International Airport like wildfire through dry grass. Within minutes of Sarah and Emma being cleared through security, videos from dozens of phones were already uploading to social media. The image of 14 elite police dogs surrounding a small girl, their tails wagging and their fierce demeanor completely dissolved, was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Captain Richard Blackwood stood in his office overlooking the main terminal, watching the screens that monitored airport activity. But his mind wasn't on the usual security concerns. It was replaying the scene over and over. Emma's small hand reaching out to Duke, the way every single one of his meticulously trained K-9 units had abandoned protocol to comfort her. The tears in Sarah Mitchell's eyes as she explained her daughter's condition. He'd made a mistake. A big one. And in the age of viral media, mistakes didn't stay private. His phone buzzed with its 14th call in the past hour. This time it was Airport Director Margaret Chen, and Blackwood knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. "Director Chen," he answered, keeping his voice steady. "Captain Blackwood, my office, now." The line went dead. Blackwood straightened his uniform and made his way through the corridors he'd walked confidently for years. But today, something felt different. Airport employees who normally nodded respectfully now looked at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, judgment, disappointment. Director Chen's office was on the top floor, with windows that overlooked the entire airport complex. She was a woman in her 50s who had built her career on innovation and public relations. When Blackwood entered, she was standing at her window, arms crossed, watching a plane take off. "Do you know what's trending on social media right now?" Chen asked without turning around. "I can imagine," Blackwood replied. "Airport dogs choose girl over training. Little girls gift stunned security. When love defeats protocol." Chen finally turned to face him, and her expression was complicated. "We have news vans setting up outside. The video has been viewed millions of times. Everyone wants to know who that little girl is and why 14 police dogs treated her like she was the most important thing in the world." Blackwood remained silent, unsure what response was appropriate. "What I want to know," Chen continued, moving to sit behind her desk, "is what you were thinking deploying every single K-9 unit for what turned out to be a false alarm. The scanner detected something unusual," Blackwood began. "Protocol," Chen interrupted, "dictates appropriate response to actual threats. What happened down there was not appropriate response. It was excessive force applied to a small child and her mother who were simply trying to catch a flight." The words stung because they were true. Blackwood had spent his entire career hiding behind protocol, using it as a shield against having to make human judgments. But protocol hadn't prepared him for Emma Mitchell. "You're right," Blackwood said quietly. "I was wrong." Chen studied him for a long moment. "Do you know why I'm not firing you right now?" Blackwood shook his head. "Because Officer Hayes sent me her full report, including what happened after the dogs surrounded that little girl. She said you did something you've never done in your entire career here. You apologized." Chen leaned forward. "That tells me maybe there's hope for you yet." Before Blackwood could respond, there was a knock at the door. Officer Hayes entered, her tablet in hand, and her expression urgent. "Director Chen, Captain Blackwood, I think you need to see this." Hayes set her tablet on the desk and played a video. It was from the airport's own security cameras, showing the incident from multiple angles. But it wasn't the angles that were remarkable. It was what they revealed when played in sequence. "Watch the dogs," Hayes said, pointing to the screen. "Not just when they're around the girl, but before. Look at their body language when they first arrive." Blackwood watched carefully. The dogs had arrived tense, alert, ready for potential threat. That was their training. But the moment they got within a certain distance of Emma, something changed. It wasn't gradual. It was almost like flipping a switch. Tension dissolved into calm. Alertness transformed into gentleness. "It's like they knew," Hayes continued, "before they even saw her properly, before they got close enough to really assess the situation. They already knew she wasn't a threat. They knew she was something else entirely." "The mother said she has a neurological condition," Chen said, looking at the report Hayes had filed. "Canine empathic recognition syndrome. Have either of you heard of this before?" Both Blackwood and Hayes shook their heads. "Neither had I," Chen admitted. "So I called Dr. Melissa Rodriguez at the University Medical Center. She's one of the country's leading neurologists. She's agreed to speak with us." Chen dialed a number on speakerphone. After 2 rings, a warm voice answered. "Director Chen, thank you for reaching out. Dr. Rodriguez, I have you on speaker with Captain Blackwood and Officer Hayes. Can you explain what this syndrome is?" "Of course," Dr. Rodriguez began, and her voice carried the enthusiasm of someone discussing a subject they found fascinating. "Canine empathic recognition syndrome is extraordinarily rare. We're talking about fewer than 100 documented cases worldwide. Individuals with this condition have a unique neurological structure that produces specific pheromones and electromagnetic signals that dogs can detect and respond to instinctively. Electromagnetic signals? Blackwood interrupted. That would explain why our scanner detected something. Exactly, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. Your advanced security scanners are sensitive enough to detect unusual neural patterns. But because this condition is so rare, the system wouldn't have a reference for what it was detecting. It would just flag it as unusual. What does this condition do to dogs? Hayes asked. That's the fascinating part, Dr. Rodriguez continued. Dogs perceive individuals with this syndrome as fundamentally safe and trustworthy. It's not control or manipulation. It's more like these individuals broadcast a signal that says, I understand you, I respect you, I care about you, in a language that dogs instinctively comprehend. Aggressive dogs become calm. Fearful dogs find courage. Working dogs remember what it's like to be treated as more than tools. Blackwood felt something twist in his chest. That last part hit particularly close to home. He'd spent years training the K9 units to be perfect security instruments, but had he forgotten they were living beings with emotional needs? Is there any danger to this condition? Chen asked. None whatsoever, Dr. Rodriguez assured her. If anything, individuals with this syndrome often have therapeutic effects on dogs. There's been research into using people with this condition to help rehabilitate traumatized service animals, dogs with behavioral issues, even wild canines in certain controlled settings. After thanking Dr. Rodriguez and ending the call, the office fell into thoughtful silence. So what you're telling me, Blackwood finally said, is that I deployed 14 highly trained police dogs to investigate a child whose only threat was that she possesses a rare gift that makes dogs trust her completely. That's exactly what I'm telling you, Chen replied. Officer Hayes pulled up another screen on her tablet. Sir, there's something else you should see. After Mrs. Mitchell and Emma were cleared through security, I followed up with the handlers. Every single one reported that their dogs performed better for the rest of the day. Duke successfully detected a real security threat 2 hours later, something he hadn't been able to do for weeks. Ranger, who's been showing signs of stress from overwork, seemed completely refreshed. It's like meeting Emma reset something in them. Blackwood moved to the window, looking out over the airport. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Emma Mitchell were on a plane, flying to visit a sick grandmother. They should have been just 2 more travelers passing through, but instead, they'd become the catalyst for something he couldn't quite name yet. What do we do now? Blackwood asked, not really directing the question at anyone specific. Now, Chen said, standing up, we turn a public relations disaster into an opportunity. Those videos are everywhere. People are calling us heartless for treating a little girl like a threat. But what if we show them something different? What if we show them that our airport learned something, changed something, became better because of what happened? What did you have in mind? Hayes asked. Chen smiled. I'm thinking we need to completely redesign how we approach airport security. Not just here, but potentially set a new standard for the entire country. And I think the first step is admitting that sometimes our protocols are wrong. Sometimes compassion is more important than rigid rules. You want to change security protocols based on one incident? Blackwood asked, surprised. I want to change security protocols based on the reality that our current approach is creating more fear than safety, Chen corrected. Think about it, Captain. We treat every traveler like a potential threat. We create an atmosphere of suspicion and stress. And for what? To catch the tiny fraction of people who actually pose danger? What if there was a better way? Blackwood considered this. It went against everything he'd been trained to believe. But watching those 14 dogs choose trust over training had shaken something loose in his understanding of security. There's something else, Hayes added quietly. After the incident, I talked to Mrs. Mitchell before she went to her gate. She told me that Emma has been denied entry to schools, programs, even public parks because of her condition. People hear rare neurological syndrome, and they panic. They assume it's dangerous or contagious. Emma's spent most of her life isolated because people are afraid of what they don't understand. The words hit Blackwood like a physical blow. He'd done exactly that. He'd seen unusual scanner reading and immediately assumed threat. He'd surrounded a child with police dogs not because there was actual evidence of danger, but because something didn't fit into his predetermined categories of normal. "Where are they now?" Blackwood asked. Hayes checked her tablet. "Their flight left 40 minutes ago. They're heading to Silverton Regional Airport across the country." Blackwood pulled out his phone and started typing a message. "I need to make this right." "What are you doing?" Chen asked. "I'm contacting my counterpart at Silverton Regional. If Emma's condition triggers their scanners too, I want to make sure they're prepared. I want to make sure nobody treats that family the way I did." For the first time since the incident, Chen smiled. "That's a start, Captain. That's definitely a start." But as Blackwood sent the message, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Captain Blackwood?" The voice was male, professional, but with an edge of urgency. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Dr. Nathan Foster. I'm a researcher at the National Institute of Animal Behavior Studies. I just saw the video from your airport." "Captain, I need to talk to you about that little girl. What you witnessed today wasn't just unusual. It might be the key to a breakthrough we've been searching for." Blackwood exchanged glances with Chen and Hayes. "What kind of breakthrough?" "We've been studying how to help traumatized military and police service dogs recover from stress disorders. These animals serve and protect, but when they burn out or develop behavioral issues, we usually have to retire them. We lose billions in training investment, and more importantly, we lose the dogs themselves to conditions that destroy their quality of life." "And Emma Mitchell can help with this?" Blackwood asked, his mind racing. "If what I saw in that video is real, and every instinct tells me it is, then yes. That child has a natural ability that we've been trying to replicate artificially for years. She could potentially help hundreds, maybe thousands of service animals, but I need to reach her family, and they're not returning any calls. Everyone wants to interview them, exploit them, turn them into a spectacle. I need someone they might trust." Blackwood felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Dr. Foster, I'm the last person that family will trust. I'm the one who caused this entire situation." "Which is exactly why you might be the only one who can help," Foster replied. "You made a mistake. You admitted it. That family needs someone who understands what it's like to be wrong and want to make it right. Will you help me reach them?" Before Blackwood could answer, Hayes pulled up another screen on her tablet, her face pale. "Captain, Director Chen, you need to see this. It's breaking news." The screen showed a news report from Silverton Regional Airport. Sarah Mitchell was being interviewed, and she looked exhausted and emotional. "We're just trying to visit my mother who's dying," Sarah was saying to the camera, tears streaming down her face. "But at every airport, in every public place, my daughter is treated like something dangerous. She's not dangerous. She's a gift. But the world doesn't see gifts anymore. It only sees threats." Emma was visible in the background, sitting alone on a bench, hugging her stuffed animal. She looked small and sad, and something about the image struck Blackwood deeply. This was what his rigid protocols had created. This was the human cost of treating security as more important than humanity. "I'll do it," Blackwood said to Dr. Foster. "I'll help you reach them, but on one condition." "What's that?" "We don't exploit Emma's gift. We don't turn her into an experiment or a spectacle. We help her and her family on their terms, with their dignity intact. And we use what she teaches us to make things better for both service animals and the people who work with them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Dr. Foster said, "Captain Blackwood, I think you and I are going to work very well together." As Blackwood ended the call, he looked at Director Chen and Officer Hayes. Three people who, just hours ago, had been focused solely on security protocols and procedures. Now they were contemplating something much larger. How one small girl's extraordinary gift might change not just airport security, but the entire relationship between humans and working animals. "This is bigger than we thought," Hayes said quietly. "Everything important always is," Chen replied. She turned to Blackwood. "Captain, I'm going to need you to do something that might be the hardest thing you've ever done in your career." "What's that?" "I need you to admit publicly that you were wrong. Not just to me, not just in reports, but to the world watching those videos. And then, I need you to work with Dr. Foster to turn this incident into something positive. Can you do that?" Blackwood thought about his career, his reputation, his pride. Then he thought about Emma sitting alone on that bench, isolated by a gift she never asked for, punished by a world that feared what it didn't understand. "Yes," he said firmly. "I can do that." Outside the office windows, planes continued to take off and land, carrying millions of travelers through the sky. Each one a person with their own story, their own struggles, their own hidden gifts. And for the first time in his career, Captain Richard Blackwood understood that real security wasn't about treating everyone as a potential threat. Real security was about creating a world where people could be different, extraordinary, unique, and still be safe. The transformation had begun. The airplane touched down at Silverton Regional Airport just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah Mitchell watched Emma press her small face against the window, fascinated by the lights of the unfamiliar city below. But Sarah couldn't share her daughter's wonder. Her stomach was twisted with anxiety about what awaited them, both at the airport and at the hospital where her mother lay fighting for her life. "Mommy, will Grandma be okay?" Emma asked, her voice small and worried. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." As they deplaned and made their way through the jetway, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into another confrontation. She'd seen the looks from other passengers during the flight. Some curious, some sympathetic, a few hostile. The video from Riverside International had spread everywhere. Privacy was a luxury they no longer possessed. The terminal at Silverton Regional was smaller than Riverside, but busy nonetheless. Sarah gripped Emma's hand tightly as they approached the main corridor. But something was different here. Airport security officers were stationed along their path, but they weren't positioned aggressively. They were simply standing at attention, watching. Then Sarah saw him. A man in a security supervisor's uniform, older than Blackwood, with gray hair and kind eyes. He approached them directly, and Sarah instinctively pulled Emma closer. "Mrs. Mitchell," the man said gently, "I'm Chief Security Officer Marcus Webb. Captain Blackwood from Riverside International contacted me about your arrival." Sarah tensed. "Are we being detained again?" "No, ma'am," Webb said quickly, his expression genuinely apologetic. "Quite the opposite. I wanted to personally escort you through the airport to ensure there are no difficulties. Your daughter won't be flagged by our scanners, and you won't face any delays." Sarah felt tears of relief threatening to spill. "Thank you. My mother is in critical condition. Every minute counts." "I understand completely," Webb replied. "And Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know, what happened at Riverside was wrong. Captain Blackwood was very clear about that in his communication. We're here to help, not hinder." As they walked through the terminal, Sarah noticed something remarkable. Airport employees who saw them didn't stare with suspicion or curiosity. They smiled. Some even waved at Emma, who shyly waved back. It was as if the entire airport had been briefed not just to tolerate them, but to welcome them. "Chief Webb," Sarah said as they approached the exit, "why are you doing this? Blackwood humiliated us. Why would he reach out to help?" Webb stopped and turned to face her fully. "Because sometimes good people make terrible mistakes. And the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes. It's what they do afterward. Captain Blackwood is trying to make things right. He asked me to give you this." Webb handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on Riverside International Airport letterhead. "Mrs. Mitchell, I cannot undo what I did to you and Emma. I cannot erase the fear and humiliation I caused. But I can ensure it never happens again. Not to you, not to anyone else. I'm working with researchers who believe Emma's gift could help thousands of service animals who suffer from trauma and stress disorders. But this is your family's decision, not mine. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. Your mother is waiting for you. Don't let anything else delay that reunion." With deepest apologies, Captain Richard Blackwood Sarah read the note twice. Her emotions a complicated mixture of anger at what had happened and surprise at this gesture of genuine contrition. "There's a car waiting outside," Webb said. "It'll take you directly to Silverton General Hospital. No charge. Just our way of apologizing for the difficulties you've experienced in airports." 20 minutes later, Sarah and Emma were rushing through the corridors of Silverton General Hospital, following the signs to the intensive care unit. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor polish, and the fluorescent lights gave everything a harsh, clinical quality. Emma held her stuffed animal tightly, her eyes wide with fear. When they reached room 347, Sarah paused outside the door, trying to prepare herself for what she might see. Her mother, Catherine Torres, had always been a force of nature, strong, independent, full of life. The thought of seeing her diminished by illness was almost unbearable. "Remember, sweetheart," Sarah said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Grandma might look different. She's very sick, but she's still Grandma, and she loves you very much." Emma nodded solemnly. "Will the hospital make her scared like the airport made me scared?" The question pierced Sarah's heart. "No, baby. The hospital is here to help Grandma get better." They entered the room, and Sarah's breath caught. Her mother lay in the hospital bed, connected to various monitors and IVs. Catherine's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. She looked so much smaller than Sarah remembered, as if the illness had stolen not just her health, but her very presence. "Mom," Sarah whispered, approaching the bed. "Mom, we're here." Catherine's eyes fluttered open, and when she saw Sarah and Emma, something remarkable happened. Despite her obvious pain and weakness, she smiled. It was a smile that carried all the love a mother could hold for her child and grandchild. "Sarah," Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper, "and my sweet Emma, you came." Emma carefully climbed onto a chair next to the bed, reaching out to hold her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, you have to get better. Mommy says you're fighting really hard." "I am, sweetheart," Catherine assured her. "For you and your mommy, I'll fight as hard as I can." A nurse entered to check Catherine's vitals. Her name tag read Lisa Brennan, and she had the efficient kindness of someone who'd spent years caring for the critically ill. "Mrs. Torres, how are you feeling?" Nurse Brennan asked, checking the monitors. "Better now that my family is here," Catherine replied weakly. Nurse Brennan smiled at Sarah and Emma. "Family is the best medicine. You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like." She paused, studying Emma with sudden interest. "Wait, are you the little girl from the airport video? The one with all the police dogs?" Sarah tensed, preparing to protect Emma from another uncomfortable situation. But Nurse Brennan's expression was one of genuine wonder, not suspicion. "That was incredible," Brennan continued. "My brother is a K-9 officer in the city police department. He works with a dog named Atlas who's been struggling with anxiety from overwork. When he saw that video, he said it was the first time he really understood that his partner needed help, not just training. You opened a lot of people's eyes." Emma looked up at the nurse with her characteristic openness. The doggies were sad. They just needed to know someone cared. Brennan's eyes welled with tears. "That's exactly what my brother said Atlas needed. You're a very special little girl." After the nurse left, Catherine gestured weakly for Sarah to come closer. "Tell me what happened at the airport. I saw something on the news, but I want to hear it from you." Sarah recounted the entire incident, from the scanner alarm to the 14 police dogs to Blackwood's apology. Catherine listened with an expression that shifted from anger to wonder to something that looked almost like pride. "That man should never have treated you that way," Catherine said firmly, more strength in her voice than Sarah had heard since arriving. "But Emma, my granddaughter showed the world something important." "What's that, Mom?" "That fear makes us do terrible things, and that sometimes the things we're most afraid of are actually the greatest gifts." Catherine looked at Emma with pure love. "Your daughter has spent her whole life being treated as something dangerous when she's actually something miraculous." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but I don't know how to protect her from a world that doesn't understand." "Maybe," Catherine said thoughtfully, "you don't protect her by hiding her gift. Maybe you protect her by showing the world why it matters." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. It was an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "A proposal that could change everything." Sarah opened the email and began reading. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, my name is Dr. Nathan Foster. I'm a researcher at the National Institute of Animal Behavior Studies. Captain Blackwood provided your contact information at my request, though I understand if you're hesitant to trust anyone in security after your experience. I've spent 15 years studying stress disorders in working dogs, police K-9s, military service dogs, search and rescue animals. These incredible beings give everything to protect and serve us, but we've had limited success helping them when they develop psychological trauma from their work. What I saw in that video from Riverside International was unprecedented. Your daughter has a natural ability that could revolutionize how we rehabilitate traumatized service animals. I'm not asking you to turn Emma into an experiment. I'm asking if you would consider letting her help dogs who desperately need what she can offer. I have a facility here in Silverton with 12 retired police and military dogs, all suffering from severe anxiety and trauma. They're animals who gave years of service and are now struggling to simply exist peacefully. Traditional therapy has had minimal success. Would you be willing to visit the facility? No pressure, no obligations, just an opportunity to see if Emma's gift might help these dogs find peace. Respectfully, Dr. Nathan Foster Sarah read the email aloud to her mother. When she finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think, Mom?" Sarah asked. "I think," Catherine said slowly, "that sometimes opportunities come disguised as complications. This gift Emma has, it's isolated her, made her life difficult. But what if it could become something positive? What if instead of being afraid of what makes her different, she could use it to help others?" "She's just a child," Sarah protested. "She shouldn't have to carry that responsibility." "I'm not saying she should carry responsibility," Catherine clarified. "I'm saying she should have the choice to use her gift if she wants to. Don't make decisions for her based on fear. Ask her what she wants." Sarah looked at Emma, who had been listening to the entire conversation with her characteristic serious expression. "Emma, sweetheart, did you understand what Dr. Foster is asking?" Emma nodded. "He has doggies who are sad and scared, like the ones at the airport were before they met me." "Yes, exactly. Would you like to visit these dogs? You don't have to help them if you don't want to. We can just look." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Sarah had seen since the airport incident. "Can we go tomorrow? I want to help the sad doggies feel better." That night, Sarah sat in the hospital room while Emma slept in a chair beside Catherine's bed. Her mother was also sleeping, her breathing slightly steadier than when they'd arrived. Sarah pulled out her phone and responded to Dr. Foster's email, agreeing to visit the facility the next day. Then she saw the news notifications. Everywhere, media outlets were covering not just the original airport incident, but something new. Captain Blackwood had released a video statement. Sarah clicked on the link and watched as Blackwood appeared on screen, standing at a podium at Riverside International Airport. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "My name is Captain Richard Blackwood," he began. 2 days ago I made a terrible mistake. I allowed fear and rigid adherence to protocol to override common sense and basic human decency. I humiliated a mother and daughter who were simply trying to visit a dying family member. I treated a small child with an extraordinary gift as if she were a threat. Blackwood paused, and Sarah could see genuine emotion in his expression. "I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. And I want to publicly apologize to Sarah and Emma Mitchell for what I put them through. But more than that, I want to announce changes that will ensure this never happens to anyone else." The camera pulled back to show Director Margaret Chen standing beside him. "Effective immediately," Chen announced. "Riverside International Airport is implementing new security protocols that prioritize human dignity alongside safety. We're training all security personnel to recognize that unusual doesn't mean dangerous, that different doesn't mean threatening. We're also partnering with medical and scientific communities to update our scanner databases to recognize rare conditions like Emma Mitchell's, so families like hers aren't subjected to unnecessary scrutiny." Blackwood stepped forward again. "Emma Mitchell taught me something I should have known all along, that the things that seem most unusual are often the most valuable. That fear makes us blind to gifts right in front of us. And that real security comes from understanding, not suspicion." The video ended, and Sarah sat in the dimly lit hospital room, processing what she'd just witnessed. A man who had humiliated her family was now publicly admitting his mistake and working to change an entire system. It didn't erase what had happened, but it was something she hadn't expected. Genuine accountability. Her phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from Captain Blackwood himself. "Mrs. Mitchell, I hope you and Emma arrived safely, and that your time with your mother is peaceful. I know my apology doesn't undo the harm I caused, but I wanted you to know that I'm committed to ensuring Emma's experience leads to positive change. Dr. Foster is one of the best researchers in his field. If you decide to work with him, Emma will be treated with the respect and dignity she deserves. I hope your mother recovers fully." Richard Blackwood. Sarah looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully beside her grandmother, one small hand still holding Catherine's. Tomorrow they would visit a facility full of traumatized dogs. Emma would have the chance to use her gift to help beings who had given everything in service to others. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe the way to protect Emma wasn't to hide her gift, but to show the world why it mattered. Maybe this nightmare that had started at an airport was actually the beginning of something extraordinary. The morning sun was just beginning to break through the clouds when Sarah and Emma arrived at the National Institute of Animal Behavior Studies facility on the outskirts of Silverton. The building was modern but welcoming, surrounded by open fields where dogs could run freely. It was nothing like the sterile, intimidating environments Emma had become accustomed to fearing. Dr. Nathan Foster met them at the entrance, and Sarah was immediately struck by how different he was from what she'd expected. Instead of the clinical researcher she'd imagined, Foster was a man in his 40s with warm eyes and an expression of genuine excitement mixed with nervous hope. He knelt down to Emma's level immediately. "Emma, thank you so much for coming," Foster said gently. "The dogs I want you to meet are very special. They've all worked hard protecting people, but now they need someone to help them feel safe again. Does that make sense?" Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed animal. "Like the doggies at the airport. They were working so hard they forgot how to be happy." Foster's eyes widened. That's exactly right. How did you know that?" "I could feel it," Emma said simply, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. As they entered the facility, Sarah noticed the careful attention to creating a calm environment. Soft lighting, quiet spaces, and large windows that let in natural light. This wasn't a laboratory or a kennel. It was a sanctuary. "We have 12 dogs currently in our program," Foster explained as they walked down a corridor lined with comfortable recovery rooms instead of cages. All of them are retired from active duty due to psychological trauma. Some experienced violence during their service. Others simply burned out from the constant stress of high-alert work. Traditional therapy has helped them survive, but they're not thriving. They're not at peace. They stopped at a large observation window, looking into a spacious indoor area where several dogs were resting. Each had their own comfortable space, but Sarah noticed they were all separated, isolated from each other. "Why aren't they together?" Sarah asked. "Because they can't be," Foster replied sadly. "Most of them have developed such severe anxiety that they can't tolerate being near other dogs anymore. The very social connection that dogs naturally crave has become a source of stress for them." Emma pressed her small hands against the glass, studying each dog with intense concentration. "That one is the saddest," she said, pointing to a large dog lying alone in the farthest corner, his body tense even in rest. Foster followed her gaze, and his expression became even more somber. "That's Thor. He was a military service dog deployed in conflict zones for 6 years. He saved countless lives, detecting threats before they could harm soldiers. But the constant exposure to danger broke something inside him. He's been with us for months, and he won't interact with anyone. Not other dogs, not handlers, not even me. We've tried everything. What happens if he doesn't get better?" Sarah asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Foster's silence was answer enough. Finally, he spoke quietly. "We have a meeting scheduled for next week. His quality of life is so poor that we're discussing humane options. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for an animal in unrelenting psychological pain is let them go peacefully." "You're going to let him die?" Emma's voice was small but sharp with an emotion that surprised Sarah. It wasn't just sadness, it was outrage. "That's not fair. He helped people, and now nobody will help him?" "We've tried to help him, sweetheart," Foster said gently. "But Thor won't let anyone close enough. He's locked inside his trauma, and we don't have the key." Emma looked up at her mother with an expression Sarah had never seen before. It was determination mixed with something that looked almost like purpose. "I can help him. I know I can." Sarah felt her protective instincts flaring. "Emma, Dr. Foster said Thor won't let anyone near him. What if he's dangerous?" "He's not dangerous," Emma said with absolute certainty. "He's scared. There's a difference." Foster studied Emma for a long moment. "Your daughter is right. Thor has never shown aggression, only fear and withdrawal. But Emma, I need you to understand. Thor might not respond to you the way the airport dogs did. His trauma is very deep." "Can I try?" Emma asked, still looking at her mother. Sarah's mind raced. Every maternal instinct screamed to protect her daughter from potential disappointment or harm. but she remembered her mother's words from the hospital. Don't make decisions for her based on fear. Okay, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. But I'm going in with you. Actually, Foster interjected carefully, I think Emma should go in alone. Adults carry their own stress and anxiety, and dogs can sense that. Emma's gift works because she's pure of that kind of fear. If you're in there worried about her safety, Thor will sense your fear, and it might interfere. Sarah looked through the window at Thor, still lying alone in his corner, and then at her daughter's determined face. She was being asked to let her child walk alone into a room with a traumatized military dog who'd been through horrors she couldn't imagine. I'll be right here watching, Foster assured her. If anything seems wrong, we can intervene immediately. But Mrs. Mitchell, I've been studying animal behavior for 20 years. I promise you, if anyone can reach Thor, it's Emma. Sarah knelt down and held Emma's shoulders. Are you sure about this, baby? Emma nodded. The doggies at the airport showed me I could help. Maybe that's why I have this gift, Mommy. Maybe I'm supposed to help the ones who can't help themselves anymore. The wisdom in those words, coming from someone so young, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She hugged Emma tightly, then stood and nodded to Dr. Foster. All right, let's do this. Foster led them to an entrance to the recovery area. Before opening the door, he briefed Emma carefully. When you go in, move slowly. Don't go directly toward Thor. Let him observe you first. And Emma, no matter what happens, remember that you can leave anytime you want. There's no pressure to fix everything today. Emma nodded seriously, handed her stuffed animal to her mother for safekeeping, and walked through the door into the recovery area. Sarah watched through the observation window, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Foster stood beside her, his attention completely focused on the scene unfolding before them. Emma entered the large room and immediately did something that surprised both adults. Instead of looking at Thor, she sat down on the floor near the entrance, cross-legged, and simply waited. She didn't call to him, didn't try to approach, didn't make herself seem either threatening or overly friendly. She just existed peacefully in the space, as calm as if she were sitting in her own bedroom. Minutes passed. Sarah was about to ask if something should be happening when she noticed Thor's head move slightly. He was looking at Emma, studying her with an intensity that spoke of an animal trying to assess a potential threat. But Emma didn't react to his attention. She remained still, peaceful, her small body language communicating something that even Sarah, watching from outside, could feel. Safety. More minutes passed. Then, so slowly that Sarah almost missed it, Thor shifted his position. Not much. Just enough that he was facing Emma more directly, instead of keeping his back partially toward her. That's significant, Foster whispered, awe in his voice. Thor hasn't willingly faced toward a person in months. He always keeps escape routes visible. Emma began to hum softly, a melody Sarah recognized from lullabies she'd sung when Emma was a baby. The sound was gentle, rhythmic, soothing, and something remarkable began to happen. Thor's body, which had been rigid with tension, started to relax. Not suddenly, but gradually, like ice melting under warm sun. His breathing, which had been shallow and rapid, began to slow and deepen. Then Thor did something that made Foster gasp audibly. He stood up. For the first time in months, Thor voluntarily stood and began moving toward another living being. His approach was cautious, hesitant, with frequent pauses, where he seemed to be warring with himself between the instinct to connect and the trauma that told him connection meant danger. But he kept moving, drawn toward Emma by something stronger than his fear. When Thor was about 10 feet away, he stopped and sat down. He was close enough now that any sudden movement could be threatening, but he made no aggressive gestures. He simply sat and watched Emma, who continued humming her gentle melody. What you're witnessing, Foster said, his voice thick with emotion, is a dog who's been locked in psychological prison for months, choosing to open the door. I've never seen anything like this. Emma slowly raised one hand, palm up, in the same gesture of offering friendship she'd used with Duke at the airport. She didn't reach toward Thor. She simply offered, letting him make the choice. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Thor remained still. Then, moving with a vulnerability that was heartbreaking to witness, he took 3 more steps forward and gently touched his nose to Emma's outstretched palm. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Foster was openly crying beside her. They were witnessing more than just a girl and a dog making contact. They were witnessing the healing of a soul that everyone had believed was beyond saving. Emma began speaking to Thor in a voice so soft that Sarah couldn't hear the words through the glass. But whatever she was saying, Thor was listening. His entire focus was on this small girl who had walked into his isolated world and offered him something he thought he'd lost forever, the possibility of trust. Then Emma did something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. She laid down on her side on the floor, making herself completely vulnerable, showing Thor that she trusted him absolutely. It was a risk that would have terrified any handler. A traumatized military dog, a small child, no barriers between them. Every protocol would have screamed against this moment. But Thor, looking at Emma's vulnerable form, did something that proved her instinct had been right. He walked the remaining distance, carefully laid down beside her, and rested his head gently near her shoulder. Not touching, but close. Close enough to feel her presence, close enough to share space, close enough to remember what connection felt like. My God, Foster breathed. She did it. She actually reached him. They stayed like that for nearly 20 minutes. Girl and dog lying peacefully together while Sarah and Foster watched through tear-blurred eyes. Emma occasionally spoke softly to Thor, and he would respond with small movements of his ears or tail. Communication so subtle that only someone watching carefully would notice. When Emma finally stood to leave, Thor stood too, and instead of immediately returning to his isolated corner, he watched her walk toward the exit, his posture open rather than defensive. As Emma reached the door, she turned back and gave Thor a small wave. Thor's tail wagged, just twice, but it was clear and unmistakable, the first time he'd shown positive emotion in months. Sarah met Emma at the door, pulling her into a tight embrace. Baby, that was incredible. How did you know what to do? I didn't know, Emma admitted. I just felt what he needed. He needed someone to show him it was okay to trust again. Foster joined them, and Sarah could see that he was struggling to maintain professional composure. Emma, what you just did. We've had Thor in therapy for months with trained specialists. You accomplished more in 30 minutes than we've managed in all that time. Can I come back tomorrow? Emma asked. Thor is feeling better, but he's not all the way better yet. You can come back every day if you want to, Foster said immediately. Then, remembering this wasn't his decision, he looked at Sarah. If that's okay with your mother. Before Sarah could respond, Foster's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed. It's Captain Blackwood. He's been calling every day asking for updates. Do you mind if I tell him what just happened? Sarah considered for a moment, then nodded. Put him on speaker. Foster answered the call. Captain Blackwood, I'm here with Mrs. Mitchell and Emma. You're on speaker. Mrs. Mitchell, Emma. Blackwood's voice came through, formal but with an underlying current of genuine concern. I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to check if everything was all right with your visit to Dr. Foster's facility. More than all right, Foster interjected before Sarah could respond. Captain, what I just witnessed, I need to show you. Can you come to the facility? I'm actually in Silverton, Blackwood replied, surprising everyone. I took personal leave to be nearby in case I could help in any way. I can be there in 20 minutes. Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of her was still angry at the man who had humiliated her family, but another part recognized that his actions since that incident showed genuine remorse and desire to make amends. Come, Sarah said. You should see this. True to his word, Blackwood arrived quickly. He looked different out of his formal security uniform, more human, more vulnerable. When he saw Emma, he immediately knelt down. Emma, I owe you an apology. What I did at the airport was wrong. I scared you, and I made your mom upset, and I'm truly sorry. Emma studied him with her characteristic seriousness. You thought I was bad because you didn't understand, but you're trying to understand now. That's what matters. The simple forgiveness from a child brought visible emotion to Blackwood's face. He turned to Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. You're right, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. You don't deserve it. But I'm going to give it to you anyway, because holding on to anger won't change what happened, and you're clearly trying to make things better. Foster led Blackwood to the observation window and showed him footage of Emma's session with Thor. As Blackwood watched the playback, Sarah saw his expression transform from curiosity to absolute astonishment. "That dog was scheduled to be euthanized next week," Foster explained. "We'd exhausted every therapeutic option. But in 30 minutes, Emma reached him in ways that months of professional intervention couldn't." Blackwood watched the screen in silence, and when he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "My K9 units at Riverside, Duke, Ranger, all of them, they've been performing better since they met Emma. I thought it was coincidence, but it's not, is it? She actually helped them. She helped them remember why they do what they do," Foster explained. "Working dogs can become so focused on the work that they forget the joy of connection. Emma reminds them of that fundamental need." "How many dogs like Thor are out there?" Blackwood asked. "Thousands," Foster replied. "Military dogs, police canines, search and rescue animals. They all face similar risks of psychological burnout and trauma. We've been losing incredible animals to conditions we don't fully understand how to treat. What if Emma could help more of them?" Blackwood turned to Sarah. "I know I have no right to ask anything of your family, but Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter has a gift that could save lives. Not just dogs' lives, but potentially the humans they protect. If Emma could help develop new protocols for working with traumatized service animals—" "She's a child," Sarah reminded him firmly. "Not a tool or a treatment." "You're absolutely right," Blackwood agreed quickly. "I'm not suggesting she be used. I'm suggesting she be honored, that her gift be recognized and supported, that she be given the choice to help if she wants to, without pressure or obligation." Emma had been listening to the entire conversation. "Mommy, I want to help. The doggies need someone who understands them." Sarah looked at her daughter, this small person who had been treated as a threat, isolated by fear, humiliated in public, and saw not a victim, but someone with extraordinary purpose. "Then we'll figure out how to do this right," Sarah said. "On our terms, protecting Emma's childhood, but allowing her to use her gift if she chooses." Foster's eyes lit up. "We could develop a program, 1 session per week, always supervised, always optional. Emma wouldn't be an experiment or a treatment method. She'd be a consultant, teaching us what she knows about connecting with traumatized animals. And we document everything," Blackwood added. "Show other security agencies, police departments, military divisions. Change how we understand and support working dogs. Emma at the airport didn't just help 14 dogs. She exposed a flaw in how we've been approaching animal welfare in service positions." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the rapid expansion of possibility, but she also felt something else. Pride. Pride that her daughter's gift, which had caused so much difficulty, might become something that helped thousands of animals who'd given everything in service to others. "We start small," Sarah insisted. "Emma comes back tomorrow to work with Thor. If that goes well, we talk about expanding. But the moment this becomes stressful, or stops being something Emma wants to do, we stop." Agreed? Everyone nodded in agreement. As they prepared to leave, Emma asked to see Thor one more time through the observation window. The large dog was no longer in his isolated corner. He was lying peacefully in the center of his space, his body relaxed in a way Foster said he hadn't seen in months. "He's dreaming," Emma observed, watching Thor's paws twitch slightly. "Good dreams, not scary ones. He's remembering what it feels like to be safe." That evening, back at the hospital with Catherine, Sarah recounted the day's events. Her mother listened with tears in her eyes. "You're doing the right thing," Catherine said weakly but firmly. "Emma has spent her whole life being defined by what makes her different. Now she gets to be defined by how that difference helps others." "Mom, there's something else," Sarah said, taking her mother's hand. "Watching Emma with Thor today, she has such purpose, such clarity about who she is and what she can do. I spent years trying to protect her by hiding her gift, but maybe I was actually limiting her." "You were being a good mother," Catherine assured her. "You protected her when the world wasn't ready to understand. But now the world has seen what she can do. They can't unsee it. So instead of hiding, you're helping her shine. That takes different courage, but it's still protection, just of a different kind." Later that night, as Emma slept peacefully in the hospital room, Sarah received an email from Dr. Foster with video footage of Thor's entire afternoon after Emma had left. The dog, who had been isolated and traumatized, was now showing interest in his surroundings, moving around his space, even cautiously interacting with one of the facility handlers for the first time in months. In just one session, Emma had given Thor back something everyone thought was lost forever: hope. And Sarah realized that Emma had given her something too: the understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, and that the things that make us different are often the things that make us most valuable. Tomorrow, they would return to the facility. Thor would continue healing, and Emma would continue discovering that her gift, which had caused so much pain, might actually be the key to preventing pain for thousands of others. The transformation was far from complete, but it had truly begun. 3 weeks had passed since Emma first walked into the recovery room with Thor. 3 weeks that had transformed not just one traumatized military dog, but had begun rippling outward in ways that nobody could have predicted. Sarah stood outside the observation window at the National Institute of Animal Behavior Studies, watching her daughter work with not just Thor anymore, but 3 other dogs who had been deemed beyond rehabilitation. Emma sat in the center of the room, surrounded by animals who weeks ago couldn't tolerate human presence, let alone find peace in it. But the most remarkable sight was Thor himself. The dog who had been scheduled for euthanasia was now gently guiding a newer arrival, a police dog named Atlas, who Nurse Brennan's brother had brought after seeing the airport video. Thor, once locked in his own trauma, had become a mentor to other traumatized dogs, as if Emma had awakened not just his capacity to heal, but his capacity to help others heal. "It never stops being miraculous," Dr. Foster said, joining Sarah at the window. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been working 18-hour days, but also the exhilaration of someone witnessing their life's work finally succeeding. "We've had to expand the facility twice already. We have applications from military bases, police departments, and search and rescue organizations across 12 countries wanting to send their traumatized service animals here." 12 countries? Sarah repeated, stunned. The video from Riverside went viral globally, but it wasn't just the spectacle, it was what happened after. When people saw Thor's transformation, saw him helping other dogs, saw Emma's gift being used with dignity and respect instead of exploitation, something shifted. People started asking why we weren't doing more to help service animals who sacrifice everything for us. Sarah felt pride swelling in her chest, but also protective concern. "Nathan, we agreed Emma would only work 1 day per week. She's still a child. She still needs to be a child." "And she is," Foster assured her quickly. "Emma comes here every Saturday for 3 hours. The rest of the week, she is focusing on her studies and having time to play, being exactly who she should be at her age. But Sarah, in those 3 hours each week, she's giving traumatized animals something that months of traditional therapy couldn't provide. And more importantly, she's teaching us how to connect with them, even when she's not here." He pulled up a tablet, showing training videos. "We've been documenting everything Emma does. Her body language, her vocalizations, her approach methods. We're training handlers to replicate her techniques. Obviously, they don't have her neurological gift, but they can learn her compassion, her patience, her way of prioritizing the animal's emotional needs over rigid protocols." Sarah watched the videos, seeing handlers who had once treated working dogs as equipment, now treating them as partners who needed emotional support. It was a paradigm shift happening in real time. "There's something else," Foster continued, his expression becoming more serious. "Captain Blackwood is here. He's brought someone important who wants to meet Emma." Sarah tensed slightly. Her relationship with Blackwood had evolved from anger to cautious respect, but she still protected Emma fiercely from anyone who might try to exploit her gift. "Who?" Sarah asked. "Admiral Patricia Morrison, Director of Military Working Dog Programs for the entire armed forces. She oversees thousands of service dogs deployed worldwide. After seeing what Emma accomplished with Thor, she wants to implement new welfare protocols across all military working dog units." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened and Captain Blackwood entered, accompanied by a woman in military uniform, whose bearing spoke of decades of leadership. But what struck Sarah most was how different Blackwood looked. The rigid authoritarianism had been replaced by something softer, more human. He'd begun volunteering at the facility 2 weeks earlier, working directly with traumatized dogs under Emma's occasional guidance. Mrs. Mitchell, Blackwood greeted her with genuine warmth. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Admiral Morrison flew in specifically to see Emma's work. Admiral Morrison stepped forward, and despite her military formality, her eyes showed deep emotion. Mrs. Mitchell, I've spent 30 years working with military dogs. I've seen the incredible things they accomplish and the terrible toll it takes on them, but I've never seen anything like what your daughter can do. Emma doesn't perform on command, Sarah said protectively. She helps because she wants to, when she wants to. I understand completely, Morrison replied. I'm not here to recruit your daughter or turn her into a military asset. I'm here because she's shown us that we've been failing our four-legged soldiers. We train them to be fearless, to suppress their natural instincts for safety, to work until they break. Then when they break, we don't know how to help them. Your daughter showed us the missing piece, treating them as beings with emotional needs, not just as tools. Morrison pulled out a folder thick with documents. I'm proposing a complete overhaul of military working dog welfare protocols. Mandatory mental health assessments, required rest periods, retirement programs that actually support their transition. Handler training that emphasizes emotional connection, not just obedience. And most importantly, facilities like Dr. Foster's at every major military base where traumatized animals can receive real therapeutic support. That's incredible, Sarah breathed. But why are you telling me? Because I want to name the program after your daughter, Morrison said simply. The Emma Mitchell Protocol for Service Animal Welfare. Not to exploit her, but to honor what she taught us. That the strongest, most capable working animals are the ones who know they're valued, not just for what they do, but for who they are. Sarah felt tears forming. This was so much bigger than she'd imagined. Emma's humiliation at an airport had become a catalyst for systemic change that would affect thousands of animals. I need to talk to Emma, Sarah said. They found Emma sitting with Thor, Atlas, and the other dogs during a break. When Sarah explained Admiral Morrison's proposal, Emma listened with her characteristic seriousness. Will it help more sad doggies feel better? Emma asked. Yes, sweetheart. Thousands of them. Emma considered this for a long moment. Then she looked at Thor, who was resting his head contentedly on her lap. Thor helped people for a long time. Then nobody helped Thor. If this program helps dogs like Thor, then yes, they should use my name, because that means people will remember to take care of the dogs who take care of us. Admiral Morrison knelt down to Emma's level. Thank you, Emma. You've shown us something we should have known all along, that taking care of our heroes means taking care of all their needs, not just their training. As Morrison left to begin implementing the new protocols, Sarah's phone rang. It was Silverton General Hospital. Her heart seized with fear. Her mother had been improving steadily, but she was still fragile. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. James Chen. I'm calling with news about your mother. Sarah braced herself. She's being discharged, Dr. Chen interrupted, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. Mrs. Torres has made a remarkable recovery. We're actually documenting her case because the turnaround was so dramatic. She keeps saying her granddaughter gave her a reason to fight. Sarah collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed with relief. Emma, sensing her mother's emotion, immediately came over and hugged her. Grandma's better? Emma asked hopefully. Grandma's coming home, Sarah confirmed, tears of joy streaming down her face. 1 week later, the National Institute of Animal Behavior Studies held its first public demonstration of the new rehabilitation program. The facility's outdoor area had been converted into a presentation space, with media present from across the country and internationally. Sarah stood with Catherine, who looked remarkably recovered despite her ordeal. Emma was in the demonstration area with Dr. Foster, Captain Blackwood, and 12 dogs, all of whom had been considered beyond rehabilitation before Emma's intervention. Thor was there, naturally, but so was Atlas, and Duke from the airport, and Ranger, and 8 others. Each one had their own story of trauma and recovery, and each one was there to demonstrate what healing looked like when animals were treated with the compassion they deserved. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Me. Foster addressed the crowd and cameras. 3 weeks ago, we had one traumatized military dog scheduled for euthanasia because we'd exhausted every therapeutic option. Today, That dog is helping us rehabilitate others. This transformation happened because a young girl taught us something we should have known, that healing requires connection, and connection requires seeing those we're trying to help as complete beings with emotional needs. The demonstration began with Emma entering the area. The 12 dogs, who weeks ago couldn't have tolerated such a crowded environment, remained calm. But more impressive was what happened next. Emma gave a subtle hand signal, and Thor walked to her side. Together, they approached a handler, not a specialist or a trainer, but an ordinary military dog handler who'd been taught Emma's techniques. The handler knelt down, using the same open body language Emma had demonstrated. Thor, once unable to trust any human, walked to the handler and allowed contact. It was a simple interaction, but it represented months of progress condensed into a moment that made everyone watching understand what was possible. One by one, each dog demonstrated their recovery, playing fetch when weeks ago they'd been paralyzed by fear, interacting gently with volunteers when they'd previously been too traumatized for human contact, even playing with each other when they'd been too anxious to tolerate other dogs. But the most powerful moment came when Admiral Morrison announced the Emma Mitchell Protocol was being implemented immediately across all military branches. Effective today, every military working dog in service will have access to mental health support. No animal will be asked to work past their psychological limits. And no dog will face euthanasia for trauma-related behavioral issues until they've had access to proper therapeutic intervention. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah looked at Emma, who was sitting peacefully surrounded by dogs, and realized her daughter was exactly where she was meant to be. Captain Blackwood approached the microphone, and Sarah noticed he was trembling slightly. 3 weeks ago, I made a terrible mistake. I treated a child as a threat because I didn't understand her gift. Today, I stand before you as someone who has learned that real security doesn't come from suspicion. It comes from understanding. That real strength isn't about control, it's about connection. He turned to look at Emma directly. Emma, you taught me that the things that make us different aren't flaws to be feared. They're gifts to be honored. Because of you, airport security protocols are changing worldwide. Because of you, thousands of service animals will receive the care they deserve. And because of you, I'm becoming a better person. The demonstration concluded with something nobody had planned. Thor, the dog who'd been hours from euthanasia, walked to the center of the demonstration area and simply sat, calm, confident, at peace. Other dogs joined him, one by one, until all 12 were sitting together. No commands had been given. They'd chosen it themselves. Emma walked to the center and sat among them, and the image, a small girl surrounded by dogs who'd survived trauma and found healing, became the photograph that would appear in newspapers and websites worldwide. That evening, Catherine hosted a small dinner at her home to celebrate her recovery and Emma's success. Dr. Foster was there, along with Admiral Morrison, Captain Blackwood, Officer Hayes, Director Chen, and Nurse Brennan with her brother and his dog Atlas. I want to make a toast, Catherine said, raising her glass, to Emma, who taught us that the greatest gifts often come in the smallest packages, to Sarah, who protected her daughter's gift until the world was ready to understand it, and to everyone here who helped transform a moment of injustice into a movement of change. And to Thor, Emma added seriously, because he was the bravest. He decided to trust again even when he was so scared. As everyone drank to the toast, Captain Blackwood stood. If I may, I have one more announcement. Riverside International Airport is establishing the Emma Mitchell Center for Service Animal Support. Any working dog passing through our airport will have access to rest areas designed with their emotional needs in mind. And we're training all security personnel in animal welfare and communication. It's spreading to other airports too, Director Chen added. 23 airports nationally and 41 internationally have committed to similar programs. Emma, your gift is changing how the world treats working animals. Emma looked around at the adults making grand pronouncements about programs and protocols, then asked the question that mattered most to her. Does that mean no more doggies will be sad like Thor was sad? Not all of them, Dr. Foster answered honestly. We can't save everyone, but because of you, we'll save thousands we would have lost. And the ones we can't completely heal will at least know they're valued and loved, not discarded when they can no longer work. That's good, Emma said with satisfaction, because everybody deserves to know they matter. Later that night, after guests had left, Sarah tucked Emma into bed. Baby, do you understand how many lives you've changed? Emma thought about this seriously. I helped some doggies feel better. And that made people realize they should have been helping the doggies all along. That's good. But Mommy, I didn't do anything special. I just treated them like they deserved kindness. Everybody should do that. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the wisdom contained in someone so young. You're right, sweetheart, everybody should. But sometimes it takes someone special to remind us of what we should have known all along. As Emma drifted to sleep, Sarah stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in military bases and police stations and airports, working dogs were being treated a little more gently, a little more humanely, because her daughter had shown the world what was possible. The video from the airport had been viewed over 50 million times now. But more important than the views were the changes. Real, systemic changes in how society treated animals who served. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Captain Blackwood. Thor's former handler contacted me. He saw the videos and flew across the country to see if Thor would remember him. They're reuniting tomorrow at the facility. Would Emma like to be there? Sarah smiled. Of course Emma would want to be there, because her daughter understood something most adults forgot. That healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about rebuilding connections that trauma had severed. 3 months after a little girl was surrounded by 14 police dogs at an airport, the world had learned something precious. That the things we fear are often the things we need most. That different doesn't mean dangerous. And that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Emma Mitchell had walked into an airport as a child with a rare condition. She'd walked out as a catalyst for change that would echo through decades, saving thousands of lives, both animal and human, by teaching us that compassion isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength of all. And Thor, the dog who'd been hours from euthanasia, now spent his days doing exactly what Emma had done for him, showing other traumatized animals that trust was possible, that healing was real, and that no matter how deep the darkness, there was always light waiting on the other side. The transformation was complete, but the impact would last forever.